Alright guys, so here is the publisher mark that I scanned and processed according to the other two videos. It's now placed in an InDesign document. I've got it set three ways: the original, a grayscale version, and a bitmapped grayscale version, so I can show you how the how the three kind of behave differently, and hopefully we can avoid some frustration in the process. So this first publisher mark is a full RGB image. You can always check if you're unsure by selecting it and then coming over to info. It'll say type, it'll say the color space you're working in. Um, However, this is not going to be something we can colorize. When you select the actual image, not just the blue frame, but the image itself, as evidenced by that brown frame, you'll notice that there are no color attributes, nor can we apply any. That is because this has its own properties, and it assumes, rightly so, that you don't want to be recolorizing this whole thing according to InDesign. The assumption being that you should be handling that in Photoshop or another image editing program as opposed to InDesign. So the next instance we have is this image simply grayscaled. It was step 2 in the first video of image processing in Photoshop. So we've selected the image, again evidenced by the brown frame. This does have a color applied to it, and we can apply other colors to it. The reason why InDesign allows us to do this is it doesn't assume that this is this doesn't assume that it is necessarily an image per se. It treats it more like a design element. And so we now have the ability to turn this into a monotone directly in InDesign. The reason why we'd want to do this in InDesign as opposed to Photoshop is, let's say that we decide to make this a cyan, and then later in the process we decide to make this magenta. We can do that with a single click in here, whereas if we're handling it through Photoshop, we have to do several steps to get that to change. So we want to have that flexibility, so we've imported it as a grayscale image. However, if we were to, I'm going to copy and paste this really quickly and apply this to my title page simply by Command V or paste. I'm going to resize it so it's proportional. This is still a little large, but we'll put it in there. Let's take a peek. You can still see that the color value, even though it was very, very slight, has been changed to cyan as well. That is, the element itself, which is just the penguin, isn't isolated. You can still see this filled frame. That is a function of not having bitmapped it. I'm going to delete this quickly and swap back over here. So that final step in the Photoshop post-processing, where we took the image and converted it to grayscale and then simply a bitmap with a 50% threshold, meant again that it was binary. It's black and white. There's no grayscale. If we select on this, the color space is simply black and white. So now if we were to convert this to cyan, you can see when we go into preview mode, only what was black is cyan, what was white remains white. So this makes for a much more compelling publisher mark, a much more streamlined publisher mark when it is set in there. There's no distracting text, image frame that's filled with some shade of cyan or whatever color you're applying. This is isolated and certainly the preferred method. Hopefully that helps, and I'll see you next time.